Executive orders. President Trump signs measures to help Americans affected by the coronavirus. We're at the White House. Sanctions from China. Why Beijing is targeting several U.S. lawmakers. Eye on Hong Kong. New developments in the unrest in the former British territory. And message of hope. Pope Francis asked for the international community to pray for the people of Lebanon. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, August 10th, 2020. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Eric Rosales in for Tracy Sable. President Donald Trump delivers his own coronavirus relief package in the form of executive orders, but Democrats call it a pre-election ploy. Also new tonight, growing tension with China after President Trump sends a top U.S. official to Taiwan. Let's check in with White House correspondent Owen Jensen. Owen.
Eric, we begin tonight with those executive orders. Right now, as you know, millions of Americans are struggling financially during this pandemic. And earlier today at the White House, Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany defended the president's actions while blasting Democrats.
White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany on where President Donald Trump's executive orders stand tonight.
Politics, as usual, should find no place during this pandemic, but Democrats rejected multiple clean bills to provide relief. The American people are tired of games, they seek leadership, and President Trump delivered.
The White House plan extends unemployment benefits, but cuts them from $600 a week to $400 and defers payroll taxes.
On unemployment assistance, states will provide 25% cost sharing, amounting to a total of $400 per week in benefits through the end of the year.
Critics complain the president went around Congress, but the president says he could not wait to act. He tweets, "So now Schumer and Pelosi want to meet to make a deal. Amazing how it all works, isn't it?" The president also calls for law and order in cities like Portland and Chicago, where looters targeted the Windy City's Magnificent Mile shopping district. 13 police officers hurt, 100 people arrested. Police say an officer-involved shooting sparked the unrest. Meanwhile, across the globe, the president sent Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar to Taiwan.
It's a true honor to be here to convey a message of strong support and friendship from President Trump to Taiwan.
No doubt exacerbating tensions between Washington and Beijing. Taiwan has 23 million people and has recorded just under 500 cases and 7 deaths from the coronavirus.
Highlighting Taiwan's success on health in combating COVID-19 and cooperating with the United States to prevent, detect, and respond to health threats.
Also tonight, officials in Portland say that protesters actually launched fireworks at police officers, injuring 2 of them. 16 people were arrested. Separately, President Trump tweeted today he will give his nomination acceptance speech either here at the White House or at Gettysburg. Eric?
White House correspondent Owen Jensen. Thank you very much, Owen. Meanwhile, at the Capitol, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says President Trump's use of executive orders will not take the place of another coronavirus relief bill. She and fellow Democrat Senator Chuck Schumer criticize the president's actions and continue their talks for another huge aid bill.
The House is Democratic. They need a majority of Democratic votes in the Senate. Meet us in the middle.
After 2 weeks of negotiations, Democratic lawmakers still have not reached a deal with administration officials over another COVID aid bill. And they call President Trump's executive orders, quote, an unworkable plan.
Everything is left out. Our assistance to the schools, feeding the hungry, helping people who are going to be evicted.
But Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said since Democrats have sabotaged backroom talks with absurd demands, I support President Trump exploring his options to get relief to the people who need them the most. Friday, the White House Chief of Staff expressed frustration over the negotiations.
At this point, I'm extremely disappointed that we came up here today just to hear the same thing repeated over and over again.
And emphasize the gap between the parties.
They're at $915 billion. Now, if you're talking about compromise, even with their $1 trillion Washington, D.C. magical way of saying they're going to come down $1 trillion, they can't come up with any significant cuts in their bill. What they want is a $2.5 trillion blank check.
But the Treasury Secretary says he sees areas where compromise is possible.
To the extent that they are willing to make new proposals, the Chief and I will be back here anytime to listen to new proposals.
Officials in Italy have approved the use of the abortion pill on an outpatient basis. The country's health minister is claiming the decision is based on scientific evidence. But several conservative lawmakers are blasting the announcement, saying that it forces women to experience the dangerous procedure all by themselves. Well, the Prime Minister of Britain says teachers are doing an incredible job getting ready for schools to reopen next month.
It's not right that kids should spend more time out of school. It's much better for their health, their mental well-being, obviously their educational prospects if everybody comes back to school full-time in September.
Boris Johnson spoke to kids returning to class after the summer break while visiting a school in London. He considers reopening schools a moral duty to the country and says closing schools is, quote, socially intolerable. The entire government of Lebanon is resigning over last week's devastating blast at the port in Beirut. The country's prime minister is also meeting with the president, Mishawan Aoun, who is Christian. Meanwhile, the cleanup continues nearly a week after the catastrophic explosion. Workers are using heavy equipment to move massive amounts of rubble. 200 are now reported to have died from the blast, and some 6,000 were injured.
حادثه بزرگی بود طبیعی است که مردم ناراحت باشن تبعاتی هم.
Iranian officials are accusing some countries of, quote, unacceptable use of the explosion in Beirut and claim that they're using it as a pretext for their political intentions. Iran is a strong backer of the militant group Hezbollah, which supports the Lebanese government. The Chinese government today announced sanctions against 11 notable Americans. A spokesman for the Chinese foreign minister says, quote, in response to the wrongdoing of the United States, the Chinese side has decided to impose sanctions on those who perform badly on Hong Kong issues, including U.S. Senators Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, Tom Cotton, and Pat Toomey. Republican Congressman Chris Smith was also named on the list. He chaired a hearing last month demanding that the Chinese president disclose the whereabouts of a Catholic bishop missing in China. China's actions today come after the United States imposed sanctions of its own on a Hong Kong leader and 10 others for their crackdown on political freedom. Well, police in Hong Kong have arrested a media tycoon and pre-democratic advocate. Jimmy Lai, who's reportedly a practicing Catholic, is facing charges under a new national security law. He's accused of, quote, collusion with foreign powers. The 71-year-old regularly criticized China's authoritarian rule. Joining us now is Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register. He has been following the story from the very beginning. Ed, thank you so much for joining us.
Sure, good to be with you.
What's the latest on the arrest of Jimmy Lai?
Well, we haven't heard anything really since he was arrested this morning, but we believe he's been one of at least 10 activists who've been arrested by the authorities in Hong Kong because of what they say is collusion with foreign powers. And this is part of this new national security law that came into force at the end of June. And they've used that law to arrest these activists who've really been campaigning for democracy in Hong Kong and against this hard, what they say is hard-headed and heavy-handed actions from the Chinese authorities through the Hong Kong government.
As we know, Lai is a practicing Catholic. Has there been any response from the Vatican or any church officials there in Hong Kong?
Not that we know of yet, Eric, no. But usually the Vatican and the Church tends to keep silent, certainly initially, on these sort of individual cases. But the Diocese of Hong Kong is being quite acquiescent, in fact, about this national security law. They've rather gone along with it, along with the Hong Kong government and the Chinese authorities. And the Vatican, of course, has been silent on Hong Kong for a long time now, really because of this provisional agreement, this secret provisional agreement that it has signed with China, and which comes up for renewal in September, and so they're very careful not to be rocking the boat before that renewal comes up in September.
As we know, the political unrest continues over there. Does this arrest have a wider significance on the pro-democracy movement there in Hong Kong?
Well, it does, and as people say, it signals the death knell for freedom of speech in Hong Kong, and so it is quite a significant development. Of course, it's anyone's guess how this will develop in the future, but certainly it's a bad omen. It's being seen as very much a bad omen for the future and for freedoms in Hong Kong, and it goes against the Hong Kong agreement that the Hong Kong government signed with China when it was handed back to Chinese authorities in 1997, which was to be two systems, one country, and this seems to be very much the sort of contravention of that, and so this is been very much manifested by this national security law and the developments today.
And Ed, we heard earlier about officials in Italy having approved the use of the abortion pill on the outpatient basis. Has there been any response from church officials about this?
I haven't seen any yet, but certainly they're not going to be happy with this. This is a big blow to the pro-life movement and to the church in Italy now that the abortion pill can be used not only in hospitals but now on an outpatient basis. And in the past, having it administered in hospitals was seen as a way to minimize or lessen the use of this pill. So certainly it'll be seen as a big setback in terms of the pro-life movement and, of course, in life in general and the protection of the unborn.
Definitely is a setback. Thank you so much, Ed. Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register.
Thank you, Eric.
Coming up, the World Health Organization delivers an update on the fight against the coronavirus. The head of the World Health Organization says the coronavirus pandemic can be beaten, and he knows this is a difficult moment for the world.
But I want to be clear. There are green shoots of hope, and no matter where a country, a region, a city, or a town is, it's never too late to turn the outbreak around.
Speaking at a briefing in Geneva today, the Ethiopian biologist Dr. Ted Ross said that the pandemic can be controlled, even in countries that are seeing a spike in the number of cases. Protesters in Brazil rallied in front of the São Paulo Cathedral as the number of deaths from COVID-19 reaches 100,000. They held crosses and signs on Friday protesting against the Brazilian president for his, quote, lack of action during the crisis. Demonstrators also held a memorial for the dead. Officials say the largest cemetery in Latin America is struggling to handle the high number of burials. Well, 2 members of the Catholic Medical Association have been federally appointed to the Human Fetal Tissue Research Ethics Advisory Board of the National Institutes of Health. And they will work with other appointee members to advise the Trump administration on the ethics of federally funded research, which includes tissues from the bodies of babies who were aborted. Joining me now by Skype is Dr. Greg Burke, co-chair of the Catholic Medical Association's Ethics Committee and appointee to the Human Fetal Tissue Research Ethics Advisory Board of NIH. Dr. Burke, thank you and congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Well, as a Catholic physician, let's talk about the importance of this advisory board and what insight you hope to bring to this new role.
It's a great question. I hope to bring the insight of the 2,000-year tradition of the Catholic Church in terms of its understanding of medical ethics, the importance of the dignity of life, and the sacredness of human life and its protection at all stages, but how that also relates to the application of medical science and research.
Exactly. And how important is it for these discussions to be informed by Catholic teachings when there's so many challenges out there to the human person?
Sure. Well, I think the Catholic teachings are quite beautiful, emphasizing the unique dignity of the human person. And particularly in medicine, the Catholic tradition is beautiful in terms of understanding its not only its sacred nature, its spiritual nature, but its physical nature, and how the two cannot be separated. So good medicine always recognizes science, but also recognizes the dignity of the person and their spiritual destiny.
Amen to that. And before you go, what other major ethical concerns is your ethics committee with the CMA dealing with right now?
Well, we deal with a whole host of issues, not only the pro-life issues, but not only pro-life, but areas of medical science, research, gender identity has become a big issue right now and how we approach that. It seems every other month there's a new topic to be looked at. So no end to our work right now.
Well, Dr. Greg Burke, thank you again for joining us, co-chair of the Catholic Medical Association's Ethics Committee. Thanks again, sir.
Thank you so much.
Up next, analysis on the war of words between Joe Biden and President Trump over faith. Plus, Pope Francis reminds the faithful God accompanies us on every journey. We'll explain. Tonight, with less than 3 months until the presidential election, we take a look at where things stand in the race for the White House between President Donald Trump and Vice President Joe Biden. Joining me now by Skype with the election update is John Gizzi, chief political columnist and White House correspondent for Newsmax. John, great to see you again, sir.
Great to see you again, my friend.
What's your sense of how this election is shaping up so far?
Well, it's kind of an unusual election. I would almost use the adjective unique in the sense that the United States is dealing with the unprecedented circumstances of the coronavirus, make campaigns, polling, public relations, media assaults, all of it very different. We've never been through a campaign in modern times in which there are so few personal appearances by candidates, and the race is all waged through social media and online.
Exactly.
In addition, for the first time in my career as a journalist, I won't be going to a convention of either party. Oh, I will be covering it from my living room table and, and watching it the same way all Americans do. But a lot of the behind the scenes reporting, such as when I covered the platform committee last time in Cleveland and later in Philadelphia for the Democratic convention, the rules committee fight, and the Republicans had a very significant fight over their rules to try and deny the nomination to Donald Trump. All of these things one was able to learn a lot about and report from being there in person, because people will talk. That's not going to be the case in 2020.
Exactly, John. And one of the big issues for both candidates is the coronavirus pandemic. And how do you think it's going to affect voters' opinion about this race? And also, do you think that Biden's going to be able to get his message out and turn things around?
I don't know about turning things around. The fact is that right now, Vice President Biden is in a very good position. He leads in virtually all polls and has a very strong lead in the key states. I noticed in Pennsylvania, G. Terry Madonna, leading pollster of the Keystone State, gave him a 9-point lead over a state that President Trump barely carried, albeit he was the first Republican since 1988 to do so, but he barely carried. The same is Michigan right now. Now, again, when we get into a fall campaign, a lot will depend on how the economy is at that point. Are we any closer to getting a vaccine for the virus? And if you note in polls, that is sacrosanct with voters. That's what they want more than anything, including going back to work or being out in public or not having to have the social distancing. It's that vaccine. How close we are to it may well determine the outcome of the election. For now, I'd have to say Vice President Biden is in a good position, but I'm certainly not writing off the president, Donald Trump.
Hey, John, let's turn to another big issue getting attention. That's the emergence of faith in the presidential election. First, I want to play a soundbite for you from President Trump last week talking about Vice President Biden. Take a listen.
To do things that nobody ever would ever think even possible, because he's following the radical left agenda. Take away your guns, destroy your Second Amendment, no religion, no anything, hurt the Bible, hurt God. He's against God, he's against guns.
He's against God. Big, big, strong statement there. Your reaction to that?
My reaction is that religion does enter into politics in one way or another, and has for many years. Presidential candidates for decades have talked about their faith in God how their religion impacts on their lives. And again, I think it will come up in this election. Now, Vice President Biden is someone who describes himself as a practicing Catholic. And
exactly.
He is, and he can cite where his faith has helped him through some tragedy.
And speaking of that, you know, I mean, he's talking about, you know, his faith, but yet it goes against some of the things of Catholic teachings, such as abortion, sexual orientation, gender inequality. Talk to me about that.
Yes, exactly. And I've heard him discuss about how important his Catholic faith is, and yet he separates that faith from his views on abortion. In other words, he's personally pro-life, the line of the late New York Governor Mario Cuomo, but he wouldn't impose that on others. Now, many Catholics believe that that's nonsense, that of course you impose your views. Why else would you seek elective office? And why does he do it on this particular issue? I might add that Vice President Biden used to be strongly pro-life. He even participated in some of the early marches for life, according to their chief organizer, Terry Scanlon, and his views have changed, as those did of a lot of Democrats, Bill Clinton and Al Gore among them. One other thing, Vice President Biden will receive the sacraments of his church. Many other Catholics have been told that if their life position contradicts that of the Roman Catholic faith, they are advised not to seek the sacraments of the church. Governor Tom Ridge, the former governor of Pennsylvania, former Secretary of Homeland Security, was banned from Holy Communion by the Bishop of Erie. He said he disagreed, but he followed the teachings of his church, and he has never presented himself for communion, thus sparing priests controversy and a possibly embarrassing situation. Vice President Biden does not have that opinion.
Well, always great insight from you, John. John Gizzi, thank you so much for joining us. Chief political columnist with the White House correspondent for Newsmax. Thanks again, John.
Thank you.
Well, finally tonight, Pope Francis reminds the faithful God will never abandon us, even in our most difficult times. At his weekly talk to pilgrims at the Vatican, the Holy Father says that we are called to abandon ourselves and give our worries to God. He says that he will never leave our side. Pope Francis also prayed for the people of Lebanon who are recovering from last week's deadly explosion. Well, we want to thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Eric Rosales. Have yourself a great night, and God bless.